Okay, tonight is the 21st of July and we are on the 6th night of the Digha Nikaya talks. Tonight we come to Sutta number 9, Potthapada Sutta. This sutta is about states of consciousness. Thus have I heard. Once the Lord was staying at Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's park, and at that time the wanderer Potthapada was at the debating hall near the Tinduka tree, in the single hall park of Queen Malika, with a large crowd of about 300 wanderers. Then the Lord, rising early, took his robe and bowl and went to Savatthi for alms. But it occurred to him, it is too early to go to Savatthi for alms. Suppose I were to go to the debating hall to see the wanderer Potthapada. And he did so. There Potthapada was sitting with his crowd of wanderers, all shouting and making a great commotion, indulging in various kinds of unedifying conversation, such as about kings, robbers, ministers, armies, dangers, wars, food, drink, clothes, beds, garlands, perfumes, relatives, carriages, villages, towns and cities, countries, women, heroes, street and well gossip, talk of the departed, desultory chat, speculations about land and sea, talk about being and non-being. But Potthapada saw the Lord coming from a distance, and so he called his followers to order, saying, "Be quiet, gentlemen. Don't make a noise, gentlemen. That ascetic Gotama is coming, and he likes quiet and speaks in praise of quiet. If he sees that this company is quiet, he will most likely want to come and visit us." At this, the wanderers fell silent. Then the Lord came to Potthapada, who said, "Come, Reverend Lord. Welcome, Reverend Lord. At last the Reverend Lord has gone out of his way to come here. Be seated, Lord. A seat is prepared." The Lord sat down on the prepared seat, and Potthapada took a low stool and sat down to one side. The Lord said, "Potthapada, what were you all talking about? What conversation have I interrupted?" Potthapada replied, "Lord, never mind the conversation we were having just now. It will not be difficult for the Lord to hear about that later. In the past few days, Lord, the discussion among the ascetics and Brahmins of various schools, sitting together and meeting in the debating hall, has concerned the higher extinction of consciousness and how this takes place. Some said, once perceptions arise and cease without cause or condition. When they arise, one is conscious. When they cease, one is unconscious. That is how they explained it. But somebody else said, no, that is not how it is. Perceptions are a person's self, which comes and goes. When it comes, one is conscious. When it goes, one is unconscious. Another said, that is not how it is. There are ascetics and Brahmins of great powers, of great influence. They draw down consciousness into a man and withdraw it. When they draw it down into him, he is conscious. When they withdraw it, he is unconscious. And another said, no, that is not how it is. There are deities of great powers, of great influence. They draw down consciousness into a man and withdraw it. When they draw it down into him, he is conscious. When they withdraw it, he is unconscious. It was in this connection that I thought of the Lord. Surely the Blessed Lord, the Welfarer, He is supremely skilled about these matters. The Blessed Lord well understands the higher extinction of consciousness. What then, Lord, is this higher extinction of consciousness? In this matter, Potthapada, those ascetics and Brahmins who say once perceptions arise and cease without cause or condition are totally wrong. Why is that? Once perceptions arise and cease owing to a cause and condition. There are some perceptions arise through training and some pass away through training. What is this training, the Lord? What is this training? The Lord said, Potthapada, a Tathagata arises in this world, an Arahant, Sammasambuddha, endowed with wisdom and conduct, welfarer, knower of the worlds, incomparable trainer of men to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans, enlightened and blessed. He, having realized it by his own super knowledge, proclaims this world with its devas, maras and brahmas, its princes and people. He preaches the Dhamma, which is lovely in its beginning, lovely in its middle, lovely in its ending, in the spirit and in the letter, and displays the fully perfected and purified holy life. A disciple goes forth and practices the moralities, etc. This is in Sutta number 2. That for him is morality. And then Potthapada, that monk who is perfected in morality, sees no danger from any side, etc., etc. In this way, he is perfected in morality. He guards the sense doors, etc., as in also in Sutta 2, and goes through the various stages of charana, conduct or practice of the holy life. And then having reached the first jhana, he remains in it. And whatever sensations of lust that he previously had disappeared. At that time, there is present a true but subtle perception of delight and happiness, born of detachment, and he becomes one who is conscious of this delight and happiness. In this way, some perceptions arise through training, and some pass away through training. And this is that training, said the Lord. Stop here for a moment. This part is interesting. First, the Buddha says, when a person attains the first jhana, whatever sensations of lust that he previously had disappear. Now, we went through the Sutta number 2, where the Buddha said that even before a monk attains the first jhana, the 5 hindrances disappear. But that state, the upachara samadhi, is very near to jhana. And so after that he enters the first jhana, and when he comes out of it also, the 5 hindrances are not there, we mentioned. But that is a criterion. Some people say they have attained jhana, but the anger is still very strong. The lust is also very strong. If they have attained the first jhana, the 5 hindrances, even when they come out of it, the 5 hindrances are no more hindrances. As I mentioned, they are so low that they don't hinder a person anymore. They don't obsess the mind. When they obsess the mind, they are called hindrances. When they don't, they are not called hindrances. So that is a standard. Some people, you can judge. Some people, they go for retreat and then the teacher says they have attained 4 jhanas. Some even say they have attained 8 jhanas. The teacher says so. But when we observe them, we find their anger is still very strong. Then definitely I don't think they have attained any jhana. Then the other thing interesting here, there is a true but subtle perception of delight and happiness. This piti and sukha is a subtle perception. A lot of people never study the suttas and believe what the later books say. The later books like the Visuddhimagga, they talk about different types of rapture. Which is a translation for piti. Here it says delight. So they say they are strong, very strong. Piti can overwhelm a person and all this thing. But you look here, the Buddha says this piti and sukha actually is a very subtle perception. But even though it's very subtle, the monk who enters this first jhana, he's conscious of this piti and sukha, delight and happiness. Which shows the state of the first jhana, that person when in the jhana, his mind is he's very aware. He's not like some people say, what's the use of jhana? When you enter jhana, you're not mindful. But in jhana, a person is never as mindful as when he is in jhana. The mind is very sharp and very strong and fully aware of whatever is happening. So here, even the delight and happiness is subtle. He is very aware of it, very conscious of it. So here the Buddha is saying that some perceptions arise through training and some pass away through training. The one that pass away is the sensations of lust has passed away. And those that arise is like this piti and sukha, delight and happiness. Again, among the subsiding of this one is, here it says thinking and pondering. I prefer thought directed and sustained. This is vitaka and vichara. Among with the subsiding of thought directed and sustained, by gaining inner tranquility and unity of mind, reaches and remains in the second jhana, which is free from thought directed and sustained, born of concentration, filled with delight and happiness. His former true but subtle perception of delight and happiness, born of detachment, vanishes. At that time there arises a true but subtle perception of delight and happiness, born of concentration. And he becomes one who is conscious of this delight and happiness. In this way, some perceptions arise through training and some pass away through training. Stop here for a moment. So the perception that pass away is firstly the thought directed and sustained, and then also the subtle perception of delight and happiness born of detachment. And the one that arises is the subtle perception of delight and happiness born of concentration. Again, after the fading away of delight, he dwells in equanimity, mindful and clearly aware, and he experiences in his body that pleasant feeling of which the noble ones say, "Happy dwells the man of equanimity and mindfulness." And he reaches and remains in the third jhana. His former true but subtle sense of delight and happiness, born of concentration, vanishes, and there arises at that time a true but subtle sense of equanimity and happiness, and he becomes one who is conscious of this true but subtle sense of equanimity and happiness. In this way, some perceptions arise through training and some pass away through training. Again, with the abandonment of pleasure and pain and with the disappearance of previous joy and grief, he reaches and remains in the fourth jhana, a state beyond pleasure and pain, with utter purity of equanimity and mindfulness. His former true but subtle sense of equanimity and happiness vanishes, and there arises a true but subtle sense of neither happiness nor unhappiness, and he becomes one who is conscious of this true but subtle sense of neither happiness nor unhappiness. In this way, some perceptions arise through training, and some pass away through training. So this description up to the fourth jhana. Again, by passing entirely beyond bodily sensations, by the disappearance of all sense of resistance, and by non-attraction to the perception of diversity, seeing that space is infinite, he reaches and remains in the sphere of infinite space. In this way, some perceptions arise through training, and some pass away through training. Stop here for a moment. As I mentioned before in my earlier talks, that when a person attains this first arupa or arupa jhana, here it says, passing entirely beyond bodily sensations, means that the five sense doors close. There is no seeing, there is no hearing, smell, taste, touch. These five senses close. That's why then only he enters the arupas. Again, by passing entirely beyond the sphere of infinite space, seeing that consciousness is infinite, he reaches and remains in the sphere of infinite consciousness. In this way, some perceptions arise through training and some pass away through training. Again, by passing entirely beyond the sphere of infinite consciousness, seeing that there is no thing, he reaches and remains in the sphere of no-thingness, and he becomes one who is conscious of this true but subtle perception of the sphere of no-thingness. In this way, some perceptions arise through training, and some pass away through training. And this is that training, said the Lord. So here the Buddha describes up to the sphere of nothingness or no-thingness. And also you notice here, those perceptions are subtle. Even the this perception of no-thingness, of the subtle perception of the sphere of nothingness. Potthapada, from the moment when the monk has gained this controlled perception, he proceeds from stage to stage till he reaches the limit of perception. When he has reached the limit of perception, it occurs to him, mental activity is worse for me. Lack of mental activity is better. If I were to think and imagine, these perceptions would cease, and coarser perceptions would arise in me. Suppose I were not to think or imagine. So he neither thinks nor imagines, and then in him just these perceptions arise. but other coarser perceptions do not arise. He attains cessation. And that, Potthapada, is the way in which the cessation of perception is brought about by successive steps. Stop here for a moment. When a person attains cessation of perception, it also means that he attains cessation of consciousness. Because the sutta say, once a person has consciousness, it must come together with the other aggregates, making the five aggregates. And so that's why when perceptions cease, consciousness, feeling, etc. cease. So you look how the Buddha describes how to attain this cessation of perception. This monk, he attains to a high stage, reaches the limit of perception. He goes through the sphere of nothingness, and after that, this neither perception nor non-perception, and that is the very limit. And then he decides that not to think or imagine. This, if you remember the dependent origination, the 12 links of dependent origination. Avijja paccaya sankhara, sankhara paccaya viññāṇaṃ. Ignorance conditions sankhara. Sankhara I like to translate as volition. And volition conditions viññāṇa, which is consciousness. So if a person has any volition at all, consciousness will start. And this volition is the desire for anything, the desire to live, the desire to speak, the desire to think, etc. Just as like you want to move your hand. Before you can move your hand, you must have the desire to move your hand, right? The intention, right? And then only you can move your hand. So similarly, for anything to happen, there must be the volition, and that is sankhara. So once you have sankhara, any desire at all, then consciousness will flow, and samsara will continue. That's why when a person wants to attain liberation, he will give up desire for anything, even his life or so, he gives up. And then only the mind will stop working. So here, that's why the Buddha says, he decides not to think or imagine, just don't want the mind to do anything, to act at all. Then the perceptions do not arise. So the only perception he has is that he is aware that he doesn't want to think, doesn't want to move his mind. So when he doesn't want to move his mind, I guess after some time he attains cessation, the mind stops working. What do you think, Potthapada? Have you heard of this before? No, Lord. As I understand it, the Lord has said, Potthapada, from the moment when the monk has gained this controlled perception, he proceeds from stage to stage until he reaches the limit of perception, etc., etc. And that is the way in which the cessation of perception is brought about by successive steps. And the Buddha said, that is right, Potthapada. Stop here for a moment. So you see here, Potthapada has been paying careful attention that whatever the Buddha described, he can repeat exactly what the Buddha said. Lord, do you teach that the summit of perception is just one or that it is many? And the Buddha said, I teach it as both one and many. Lord, how is it one and how is it many? And the Buddha said, according as he attains successively to the cessation of each perception, so I teach the summit of that perception. Thus I teach both one summit of perception, and I also teach many. Lord, does perception arise before knowledge, or knowledge arise before perception, or do both arise simultaneously? And the Buddha said, perception arises first, Potthapada, then knowledge, and from the arising of perception comes the arising of knowledge, and one knows, thus conditioned, knowledge arises. In this way, you can see how perception arises first, and then knowledge, and from the arising of perception comes the arising of knowledge. Stop here for a moment. So you must have perception or consciousness first before you can have knowledge. Lord, is perception a person's self, or is perception one thing and self another? Well, Potthapada, do you postulate a self? Lord, I postulate a gross self, material, composed of the four elements and feeding on solid food. And the Buddha said, but with such a gross self, Potthapada, perception would be one thing and the self another. You can see that in this way. Given such a gross self, certain perceptions would arise in a person and others pass away. In this way, you can see that perception must be one thing and the self another. Stop here for a moment. So here, Potthapada is asking the Buddha whether perception is self or not. And the Buddha said, you believe in a self? And he said, he believes in a gross self, a material self. Then the Buddha said, in that case, if that is the self you postulate, then perception must be one thing and self another. Then he changed his mind. Then he says, now, Lord, I postulate a mind-made self, complete with all its parts, not defective in any sense organ. And the Buddha said, well, with such a mind-made self, perception would be one thing and the self another. Then he says, Lord, I assume a formless self made up of perception. And the Buddha said, but with such a formless self, perception would be one thing and self another. But Lord, is it possible for me to know whether perception is a person's self or whether perception is one thing and self another? And the Buddha said, Potthapada, it is difficult for one of different views, of different faith, under different influences, with different pursuits and a different training, to know whether these are two different things or not. Stop here for a moment. So here he's asking the Buddha whether he can know whether perception and self are the same or different. And the Buddha said, you belong to another sect, you belong to a different training, and so it's difficult for you to know. Well, Lord, if this question of self and perceptions is difficult for one like me, tell me, is the world eternal? Is only this true and the opposite false? Potthapada, I have not declared that the world is eternal and that the opposite view is false. Well, Lord, is the world not eternal? And the Buddha said, I have not declared that the world is not eternal. Well, Lord, is the world infinite or not infinite? And the Buddha said, I have not declared that the world is not infinite or infinite, and that the opposite view is false. Well, Lord, is the soul and the same as the body, or is the soul one thing and the body another? Again, the Buddha says, I have not declared that the soul is one thing and the body another. Well, Lord, does the Tathagata exist after death? Is only this true and all else false? And the Buddha again says, I have not declared this. Well, Lord, does the Tathagata not exist after death, or both exist and not exist after death, or neither exist nor not exist after death? And to all these, the Buddha says, I have not declared that the Tathagata either exists or not exists, or in any other way. But Lord, why has the Lord not declared these things? Potthapada, that is not conducive to the purpose, not conducive to Dhamma, not the way to embark on the holy life. It does not lead to disenchantment, to dispassion, to cessation, to calm, to high knowledge, to enlightenment, to Nibbana. That is why I have not declared it. Stop here for a moment. So to all these questions, the Buddha says he has no answer. Doesn't want to say yes or no. And when the Potthapada asked him why, he said because it doesn't help in the holy life. It's unbeneficial. Whether you believe in it or you don't believe in it, you don't get anything out of it. It's just a view only. But Lord, what has the Lord declared? Potthapada, I have declared this is suffering. This is the origin of suffering. This is the cessation of suffering. And this is the path leading to the cessation of suffering. But Lord, why has the Lord declared this? Because, Potthapada, this is conducive to the purpose, conducive to Dhamma, the way to embark on the holy life. It leads to disenchantment, to dispassion, to cessation, to calm, to higher knowledge, to enlightenment, to nibbana. That is why I have declared it. So it is, Lord, so it is, welfarer. And now is the time for the blessed Lord to do as he sees fit. Then the Lord rose from his seat and went away. Then the wanderers, as soon as the Lord had left, reproached, sneered and jeered at Potthapada from all sides, saying, "Whatever the ascetic Gotama says, Potthapada agrees with him. So it is, Lord, so it is, welfarer. We don't understand a word of the ascetic Gotama's whole discourse. Is the world eternal or not? Is it finite or infinite? Is the soul the same as the body or different? Does the Tathagata exist after death or not, or both or neither?" Potthapada replied, "I don't understand either about whether the world is eternal or not, or whether the Tathagata exists after death or not, or both or either. But the ascetic Gotama teaches a true and real way of practice which is consonant with Dhamma and grounded in Dhamma. And why should not a man like me express approval of such a true and real practice, so well taught by the ascetic Gotama?" Stop here for a moment. So you see, his disciples could not follow the Buddha's Dhamma, could not follow the Buddha's argument at all. And they were annoyed that Potthapada agrees with the Buddha. 2 or 3 days later, Chitta, the son of the elephant trainer, went with Potthapada to see the Lord. Chitta prostrated himself before the Lord and sat down to one side. Potthapada exchanged courtesies with the Lord, sat down to one side and told him what had happened. And the Buddha said, "Potthapada, all those wanderers are blind and sightless. You alone among them are sighted. Some things I have taught and pointed out, Potthapada, as being certain, others as being uncertain. What are the things I have pointed out as uncertain? The world is eternal. I have declared it to be uncertain. The Tathagata exists after death, etc. Why? Because they are not conducive to Nibbana. That's why I have declared them as uncertain. But what things have I pointed out as certain? This is suffering. This is the origin of suffering. This is the cessation of suffering. This is the path leading to the cessation of suffering. Why? Because they are conducive to the purpose, conducive to Dhamma, the way to embark on the holy life. They lead to disenchantment, to dispassion, to cessation, to calm, to higher knowledge, to enlightenment, to Nibbana. That is why I have declared them as certain. Potthapada, there are some ascetics and Brahmins who declare and believe that after death the self is entirely happy and free from disease. I'll stop here for a moment. So here, even nowadays, there are some people like to believe, as their religion says, that after death they are in heaven and they are entirely happy, free from sickness and all kinds of dukkha. It's a promise which people like to believe. I approached them and asked if this was indeed what they declared and believed, and they replied, "Yes." Then I said, "Do you friends living in the world know and see it as an entirely happy place?" And they replied, "No." I said, "Have you ever experienced a single night or day, or half a night or day that was entirely happy?" And they replied, "No." I said, "Do you know a path or a practice whereby an entirely happy world might be brought about?" And they replied, "No." I said, "Have you heard the voices of deities who have been reborn in an entirely happy world, saying, 'The attainment of an entirely happy world has been well and rightly gained, and we, gentlemen, have been reborn in such a realm?" And they replied, "No." What do you think, Potthapada? Such being the case, does not the talk of those ascetics and Brahmins turn out to be stupid? It is just as if a man were to say, "I am going to seek out and love the most beautiful girl in the country." They might say to him, "Well, as to this most beautiful girl in the country, do you know whether she belongs to the Khattiya, the Brahmin, the merchant, or the artisan class?" And he would say, "No." Then they might say, "Well, do you know her name, her clan, whether she is tall or short, or of medium height, whether she is dark or light complexioned, or sallow-skinned, or what village or town or city she comes from?" And he would say, "No." And they might say, "Well then, you don't know or see the one you seek for and desire." And he would say, "No." Does not the talk of such a man turn out to be stupid? Certainly, Lord. So it is with those ascetics and Brahmins who declare and believe that after death the self is entirely happy and free from disease. Does not their talk turn out to be stupid? Certainly, Lord. It is as if a man were to build a staircase for a palace at a crossroads. People might say to him, "Well now, this staircase for a palace that you are building, do you know whether the palace will face east or west, or north or south, or whether it will be high or low or of medium height?" And he would say no. And they might say, "Well then, you don't know or see what kind of a palace you are building the staircase for?" And he would say no. Don't you think that man's talk would turn out to be stupid? Certainly, Lord. Stop here for a moment. So here, the Buddha is saying that there are some people who believe that after death they'll be entirely happy with no sickness whatsoever, 100% happy. Then the Buddha asks whether they know anything about that state, whether they have met anybody who came back from that place and all that. And they said no. So then the Buddha said, it's just stupid talk, just like a person claims to love the most beautiful girl in the country but never met her, doesn't know whether she's tall or short or fair or dark or anything. And similarly, a person who wants to build a staircase for a palace but he doesn't know what the palace looks like, where to put the staircase also he doesn't know. So the Buddha says all this is stupid talk. Potthapada, there are three kinds of acquired self or presumed self. The gross acquired self, the mind-made acquired self, the formless acquired self. What is the gross acquired self? It has form, is composed of the four great elements, nourished by material food. What is the mind-made self? It has form, complete with all its parts, not defective in any sense or organ. What is the formless acquired self? It is without form and made up of perception. But I teach a doctrine for getting rid of the gross acquired self, whereby defiling mental states disappear, and states tending to purification grow strong, and one gains and remains in the purity and perfection of wisdom here and now, having realized and attained it by one's own super-knowledge. Now, Potthapada, you might think, perhaps these defiling mental states might disappear, and one might still be unhappy. That is not how it should be regarded. If defiling states disappear, nothing but happiness and delight develops, tranquility, mindfulness and clear awareness, and that is a happy state. I also teach a doctrine for getting rid of the mind-made acquired self. I also teach a doctrine for getting rid of the formless acquired self. Potthapada, if others ask us, what friend is this gross acquired self whose abandonment you preach? Being so asked, we should reply, this is that gross acquired self for the getting rid of which we teach a doctrine. If others ask us, what is this mind-made acquired self? Similarly, the Buddha says, this is that mind-made acquired self. If others ask us, what is this formless acquired self? What do you think, Potthapada? Similarly, the Buddha says that this is that acquired self. What do you think, Potthapada? Does not that statement turn out to be well-founded? Certainly, Lord. It is as if a man were to build a staircase for a palace which was below that palace, and they might say to him, well now, this staircase for a palace that you are building, do you know whether the palace will face east or west or north or south, or whether it will be high, low or of medium height? And he would say, this staircase is right under the palace. Don't you think that man's statement would be well-founded? Certainly, Lord. In just the same way, Potthapada, if others ask us, what is this gross acquired self? What is this mind-made acquired self? What is this formless acquired self? We reply, this is that gross or mind-made or formless acquired self, for the getting rid of which we teach a doctrine, whereby defiling mental states disappear, and states tending to purification grow strong, and one gains and remains in the purity and perfection of wisdom here and now, having realized and attained it by one's own super-knowledge. Don't you think that statement is well-founded? Certainly, Lord. At this, Chitta, son of the elephant trainer, said to the Lord, Lord, whenever the gross acquired self is present, would it be wrong to assume the existence of the mind-made acquired self or of the formless acquired self? Thus only the gross acquired self truly exists then, and similarly with the mind-made acquired self and the formless acquired self. And the Buddha said, Chitta, whenever the gross acquired self is present, we do not at that time speak of the mind-made acquired self. We do not speak of a formless acquired self. We speak only of a gross acquired self. Whenever the mind-made acquired self is present, we speak only of a mind-made acquired self. And whenever the formless acquired self is present, we speak only of a formless acquired self. Chitta, suppose they were to ask you, did you exist in the past or didn't you? Will you exist in the future or won't you? Do you exist now or don't you? How would you answer? Lord, if I were asked such a question, I would say, I did exist in the past. I did not exist. I shall exist in the future. I shall not exist. I do exist now. I do not exist. That, Lord, would be my answer. But Chitta, if they ask, the past acquired self that you had, is that your only true acquired self? Or are future and present ones false? Or is the one you will have in the future the only true one, and are the past and present ones false? Or is your present acquired self the only true one, and are the past and future ones false? How would you reply? Lord, if they ask me these things, I would reply, my past acquired self was at the time my only true one. The future and present ones were false. My future acquired self will then be the only true one. The past and present ones will be false. My present acquired self is now the only true one. The past and future ones are false. That is how I would reply. In just the same way, Chitta, whenever the gross acquired self is present, we do not at that time speak of a mind-made acquired self or of a formless acquired self. In just the same way, Chitta, from the cow we get milk, from the milk curds, from the curds butter, from the butter ghee, and from the ghee cream of ghee. And when there is milk, we don't speak of curds, of butter, of ghee, or of cream, or of ghee. We speak of milk. When there are curds, we don't speak of butter, etc. When there is cream of ghee, we speak only of cream of ghee. So too, whenever the gross acquired self is present, we do not speak of the mind-made or formless acquired self. Whenever the mind-made acquired self is present, we do not speak of the gross or formless acquired self. Whenever the formless acquired self is present, we do not speak of the gross acquired self or the mind-made acquired self. We speak of the formless acquired self. But Chitta, these are merely names, expressions, turns of speech, designations in common use in the world, which the Tathagata uses without misapprehending them. And at these words, Potthapada the wanderer said to the Lord, Excellent Lord, excellent. It is as if someone were to set up what had been knocked down, or to point out the way to one who had got lost, or to bring an oil lamp into a dark place so that those with eyes could see what was there. Just so the Blessed Lord has expounded the Dhamma in various ways. Lord, I go for refuge to the Lord, the Dhamma and the Sangha. May the Lord accept me as a lay follower who has taken refuge in Him from this day forth, as long as life shall last. But Chitta, son of the elephant trainer, said to the Lord, Excellent Lord, excellent. It is as if someone were to set up what had been knocked down, or to point out the way to one who had got lost, or to bring an oil lamp into a dark place, so that those with eyes could see what was there. Just so the Blessed Lord has expounded the Dhamma in various ways. Lord, I go for refuge to the Lord, the Dhamma and the Sangha. May I, Lord, receive the going forth at the Lord's hands. May I receive ordination. And Chitta, son of the elephant trainer, received the going forth at the Lord's hands and the ordination. And the newly ordained Venerable Chitta, alone, secluded, unwearying, zealous and resolute, in a short time attained to that for the sake of which young men of good birth go forth from the household life into homelessness, that unexcelled culmination of the holy life, having realized it here and now by his own super-knowledge, and dwelt therein, knowing birth is destroyed, the holy life has been lived. What had to be done has been done. There is nothing further here. And Venerable Chitta, son of the elephant trainer, became another of the Arahants. That's the end of the sutta. So here we find that the Buddha explained how this perception can cease through the various stages of the jhanas. Firstly, the rupa jhanas, and then the arupas. Then later the Buddha explains how people who have certain beliefs, like this belief of some ascetics and Brahmins, that after death the self is entirely happy and free from disease, that they only believe there's no basis for it. Even in this present life, they can't attain what they think they are going to attain. So how can they attain it in the future? So after this, you see this Potthapada, he just took refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha. But Chitta not only took refuge, he requested the going forth, and the Buddha accepted him. I don't know whether I have time for another sutta. This looks not too long. We try.